All right, let's just jump right in. You know, some novels are famous for their last lines, but then there are those that are absolutely legendary for their first. Today, we're going to deconstruct one of the most famously difficult and honestly mesmerizing openings in all of literature, the start of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's The Autumn of the Patriarch. This is a book that just throws you headfirst into the surreal decay of absolute power. And boom, that's how it begins. No introduction, no slow setup, just vultures in the presidential palace. Right away, Garcia Marquez is telling us that something is deeply, deeply wrong here. The seat of power hasn't been breached by an army, but by rot itself. And we've just shown up to see what's left. So this whole opening is really a mystery. We're part of this crowd that's breaking into this abandoned palace, just following this awful stench, trying to figure out what in the world has happened. And for this explainer, we're going to follow that exact same path. We're going to piece together the totally bizarre life of this dictator, starting right where the novel does, with finding his body.
Now, what's so interesting here is the sensory overload. The very first thing that hits everybody is the smell. The book describes it as the warm breeze of a great dead man and a rotting grandeur. You see, it's not just the smell of death, it's the smell of power that is just curdled and gone bad.
And this is where it gets really weird and just perfectly illustrates the chaos. As we push deeper inside, we find the palace hasn't just been abandoned, it's been overrun. The book gives us this incredible image of cows just wandering through the formal salons, chewing on velvet curtains and leaving filth all over the portraits of national heroes. The symbol of the nation has literally become a barn. So what's really happening is that nature is taking everything back. Weeds are literally cracking through the floors. There's dust on every single surface. The silence feels ancient. The whole building, once the very heart of a nation's power, is just collapsing back into the earth. It's a huge visual metaphor for a regime that's been left to rot for way, way too long. And then, finally, tucked away in a hidden office, they find him, the Patriarch. He's on the floor, face down, with his arm tucked under his head just so. And the book tells us this is the exact position he slept in every single night of his incredibly lonely life. It's this perfect image of absolute power ending in absolute solitary routine. But, you know, finding the body only makes the mystery deeper. This brings up the central paradox of this dictator. Here was a man whose image was absolutely everywhere, an icon stamped on the entire national identity, but whose actual physical face was a complete mystery to everyone. So you have this wild contrast, right? On one side, you have the myth. His profile was on literally everything. Coins, stamps, even ads for hernia trusses, of all things. He was the face of the nation. But the reality? Well, when they finally turn his body over, his face is unrecognizable. Not because of vultures, but just from time and decay. The symbol was immortal, but the man, he was just a man. And here's the detail that's just unbelievable. The narrator says none of us had ever seen him. I mean, just think about that for a second. The most powerful man in the entire country, a guy who dominated every single aspect of life for more than 100 years, was someone nobody could actually pick out of a crowd. His power wasn't a physical thing. It was this abstract, terrifying force. Okay, so this is where the story takes its first truly bizarre turn. Just when you think you're maybe starting to get a handle on what's going on, the narrator drops a bombshell. This isn't the first time they found the dictator's body in his office dead from what looked like natural causes. So how is that even possible? Well, it's because the dictator had a secret weapon, a perfect body double. And the story of this man, Patricio Aragonés, is one of the most surreal parts of the whole novel. It's really a story about the complete and total erasure of one person's identity and replacing it with someone else's. The whole process was just meticulous and honestly pretty horrifying. Aragonés, who was just a simple con man, was brought to the palace and systematically transformed. He wasn't just taught to walk and talk like the general, he was physically altered to become him. He was forced to develop the same hernia, the same ringing in his ears. He lived the public-facing life of the dictator, went to all the ceremonies, and eventually, he died in his place during an assassination attempt. The whole thing was so perfect that when the general first saw his double, he was stunned, and he just blurted out, "Damn it, this guy is me." So it wasn't just an impersonation. It was this terrifying fusion of two people, where the line between what was real and what was a copy just completely dissolved. When the double died, who really died? So after his double is assassinated, the dictator just retreats even further into himself. The whole event confirms all his worst fears. He survives, yeah, but the cost is that he becomes utterly, profoundly alone, trapped inside a palace that's now more of a fortress against the world than a seat of government. His power becomes completely arbitrary, almost godlike, but in this really bizarre way. The book gives these amazing examples. If he wanted the day to feel longer, he would just order the clock tower to only strike twice at noon instead of 12. If he decided he wanted a door in a different place, he'd just say, "Move that door over here," and poof, it was done. Reality itself was whatever he said it was. His whole life became a masterclass in paranoia. He saw his own military as his biggest threat, so he'd intentionally give them wet gunpowder so they couldn't stage a coup. He surrounded himself with outcasts and yes-men. He fathered like 5,000 kids but didn't acknowledge a single one. He trusted only his mother. It was a life of absolute power defined by absolute crippling fear. And this was basically his grim declaration after he survived the plot that killed his double. He decides to just purge everyone and everything, to rule in a total vacuum. It is the beginning of the end, the start of that final long autumn where the palace empties out and begins its slow, unstoppable decay. So what Garcia Marquez is really showing us here is that the life of this patriarch isn't a straight line from birth to death. No, it's a cycle. He's suggesting that tyranny isn't just one man's life. It's a recurring condition, a nightmare that a nation can get trapped in. I mean, look at how this cycle works. The double's death lets the real general purge all his enemies. Then he resurrects himself in this move of pure political theater, with banners calling him the magnificent president who rose again on the third day. This moment transforms him from a ruler into a living myth, and it locks the country into the cycle of violence and worship that leads, inevitably, right back to the lonely, rotting corpse we started with. In the end, after all the power, the myths, the violence, the centuries of rule, this is what's left. A profound, almost cosmic loneliness. A man who became so powerful he basically erased himself, lost forever in an empty palace, older than any other living thing, and completely, utterly alone. And that's really the question Garcia Marquez leaves us with. By showing us two different deaths, one fake and one real, he forces us to ask, what is the true nature of power? Is it the man, or is it the myth that surrounds him? And when that man finally dies, what happens to the myth? Does it die too, or does the cycle just begin all over again?